朋友们，本期给大家转载一个视频，是一个美国教授的控诉。他控诉为什么现在美国会输给中国。在给大家看这个视频之前呢，我先说两个观点。我认为教授的阐述正好可以和我的观点进行印证。第一个观点，苏联解体的原因，在相当长一段时间，中国媒体上的报道完全都是错误的。有很多西方媒体把他们的思想强加给了我们，他们说这是因为苏联人民想要这个联邦解体。他们给出的一个主要的例子就是当时波罗的海三个小国100万人手拉手要脱离苏联，这是一个假象。诚然，当时波罗的海三个小国不想在苏联内部，但是对苏联全体国民进行的民意调查，依然有70%以上的民众赞同保留苏联。但为什么即便如此，苏联依然解体呢？那是因为苏联的掌权者、苏联的权贵们希望这个国家解体。因为在这个国家后期，这些权贵通过犯罪的手段非法获取了大量的财富。为了逃避可能出现的处罚，他们必须把可能对他们进行处罚的主体消灭掉。这个主体就是苏维埃社会主义国家联盟。这才是苏联解体的原因。第二个观点，美国这几年印发了大量的货币，这些货币本来呢发给了美国的民众，从表面上来看，美国人凭空多了很多美元，但是随之而来的是物价上涨，所以他们真实手里的财富没有增加，而物价上涨让很多钱都流落到了美国权贵和资本家的口袋。到现在为止，他们这些钱花光了，物价呢至少在通货膨胀这一块得到了控制，但物价没有下降。所以大家发现没有，美国政府花的钱通过变戏法式的又流到了资本家和权贵的口袋，普通民众的生活水平没有得到提高，有些人甚至下降。所以说这就是特朗普他为什么能够当选的原因所在。所以说美国这些权贵和资本家通过这种手段获取的财富也是非法的。所以说美国现在的权贵和苏联之前的权贵是一模一样的。所以苏联能够解体，美国它到有朝一日也必然会解体。美国现在已经出现了对这些权贵进行追责的迹象，那就是特朗普的政权。所以特朗普是导致美国可以出现解体的一个引路人，他是一个推动者。我的观点发表完毕，大家来欣赏一下这位教授的阐述。
The average real wages in the People's Republic of China have quadrupled over the same 30 years. And while he keeps saying he's hitting the Chinese with a tariff, it's not the Chinese who pay for tariffs. It's Americans. The United States' effort to stop, block, undercut China have failed. What are examples which an economist stares at with astonishment? The minimum wage at the federal level in the United States right now is $7.25 per hour, a sum of money on which nobody can live. When was the last time it was raised? 2009. That's 15 years ago. In every one of those 15 years, inflation raised the prices here in the United States of food, clothing, shelter, and everything else. Some years it went up a lot. Some years it went up only a little. But it went up. And what did we do to the people to whom we paid the lowest salary? $7.25. We didn't raise it. Republicans didn't raise it. Democrats didn't raise it. You know what that is? That's cruel and unusual punishment given to people whose crime is that they're poorly paid in the first place. What kind of a country does that? A declining empire whose rich and powerful are busy offloading the costs of that decline onto everybody else. Here's another sign. Our real wages have been stagnant for 30 to 40 years. In other words, if you measure, as we do in economics, the average wage in dollars paid to American workers, and you adjust that to the prices they have to pay when they spend their wages, it's been going up somewhere around 0.5% a year. That's called stagnation. That means your wage isn't going anywhere. By the way, in contrast, the average real wages in the People's Republic of China have quadrupled over the same 30 years. If you want to understand why the government in China is secure, why it is powerful, why economic growth there is celebrated, I just gave you the statistic. Their average wage quadrupled. The average wage in the United States went nowhere. That's not even close, friends. And if you didn't know that, since everything I'm telling you is easily verifiable in 1,000 government statistics, then you understand what I mean by denial. We are therefore experiencing in this country an extraordinary deepening of inequality. At the end of World War II, the United States was less unequal than European countries. Today, we are more unequal than every European country. How did that happen? Well, on the one hand, when corporations went to China and took advantage of low wages and a growing market, it made a fortune for those corporations and therefore for the top 10% of Americans who own shares. Just a footnote. The top 10% richest Americans own 80% of the stocks and bonds. They did well. The rest of us, we are experiencing a declining empire, which those at the top don't want you to think about. They're managing it quite well. We cannot. That inequality, together with the inflation, gives you Mr. Trump's victory and the bitterness and divisiveness that is suffusing this economy. And still, nobody willing to face these realities or to speak about them. Then there's the second wall, the tariff wall. Let me remind everyone what a tariff is. It's just a tax. It's the name given to a particular kind of tax, namely the tax charged to an American importer when that person brings something produced overseas into the United States to be sold. It means Mr. Trump, a Republican who is against taxes, is proposing an enormous tax increase. And while he keeps saying he's hitting the Chinese with a tariff, it's not the Chinese who pay for tariffs. It's Americans. The American importer will pay much more. And that person will then charge more to the consumer, you and me. And you know what that means? An inflation. The gap between the United States and the G7 on one hand, and the People's Republic of China and the BRICS on the other, deepens. The United States' effort to stop, block, undercut China have failed. Been doing it now for 15 years. Started big time under Obama. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. And so the question is, what? Do you keep doing it? What will the United States do? Continue its denial of what's going on? Threaten, as they have, China with war, despite the fact that China has nuclear weapons and the Russians do too, and they are now allied in good part because of the United States? Or are we going to sit down and work something out? Are we going to tell the American people, honestly, our empire is declining? The next one looks to be Chinese. Or if it isn't Chinese, it's going to be a multinational replacement for the kind of dominance that the Persians or the Dutch or the British or the Americans operated. The world is changing very fundamentally. We are living, as I said a half hour ago, at a time of enormously profound change. And our job as Americans is to stop behaving childishly in this game of thinking that the problems I've barely sketched don't have to be worried about, because we can continue to act as if we were in charge in the way we were in the 1960s and 70s. We aren't. Nothing like that. The war in Ukraine is lost. For those of you who don't keep track, is over, except for signing the documents. Russia won, Ukraine and the West lost. The war in Gaza isolates the United States. Indeed, what historians will say when they look back on this time will be that the United States undertook to isolate and neutralize the dangers after World War II. First in the Soviet Union, then in China, then in the global socialist world, nowadays in what are euphemistically called authoritarian societies. But the end result of the plan to isolate the rest of the world going through these efforts was to isolate the United States itself. We and Israel are standing all alone in that part of the world. And the Europeans, whose world is collapsed, they're economically a basket case. And you know why? What the major reason is that Europe is gone as a player? Because they relied on two things: exporting to China, which the Chinese don't need, and cheap energy from Russia, which they have turned away from. So the energy costs make European production uncompetitive. They have to pay too much for energy, and they can't sell in China the way they once did. They're done. Germany, which used to be the engine of European growth, is now the laggard dragging it down. It really is extraordinary, folks, that what you have thought about and assumed is now over.